Thanks for joining us today on Coastal and Progressive Rainbow Forum on Society Bites Radio. Today we will be speaking with Nathan BRUEMMER, and he will be talking about diversity and inclusion training that is going to be going on in the southwest coastal areas of Florida and possibly other areas as well. And this is an important part of the training that needs to be done to educate people about the LGBTQ plus community and about the importance of the workplace environment and so forth. And I'll let Nathan take it from here. And Nathan's got some impressive credentials behind him. He's had a long career. Nathan, welcome today.
Hi, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Great.
Yeah, so I appreciate the introduction. I think folks might think that LGBTQ plus training is the same as it's always been, but you and I both have talked many times about, I think, our changing environment. Having done training for over 20 years with both nonprofit and for-profit businesses and local law enforcement and within education settings. And then having recently worked for a couple of years as the executive director of an LGBTQ plus youth center, nothing makes it more evident, the changing world, than working with our next and our youngest and our brightest generation. The needs are evolving faster than you could imagine. And what it forced me to do was reframe how I'd been doing training, because those youth are then in high school and then in the job market, and they're going out and applying for jobs, or they're in college, and we're looking at who we're recruiting and who we're retaining and who we're promoting, and how we even view, frankly, all diversity and inclusion work. We have to meet our communities where they are, and we have to meet our businesses where they are. And so great work began decades ago, but it's next level work now for sure.
Excellent. Can you tell us a little bit about how the number of people and so forth, and how this training is being operated, and what your goal? Of course, the goal is to help educate people, but maybe you can cite from experience some of the misnomers and the confusion people do not understand about the LGBTQ plus community. And the diversity, even inside the LGBTQ plus community.
So let me tell you how this one very small pilot program came about. And it really started while I was working as the executive director of Also Youth, a phenomenal youth organization down in Sarasota. I had occasion to partner with Shannon Fortner over at the Harvey Milk Festival many times. And she noticed the need within small businesses in and around the Sarasota and Manatee area that talked about, asked her questions, would ask me questions. We'd go to lunch and brainstorm. I was already providing trainings through the school district and through private education institutions, but not as broadly as I think is important. And, Sarasota has a really vibrant community that, often folks travel from up north and are just down here part-time, or we've got a lot of international folks that come in to the restaurants and the museums and enjoy the community just for a short stay. And there seemed to be, with, I think, the increase in visibility, especially for the transgender community in the last 5 years, a need for more information to be an open and affirming city. And so, Shannon over at Harvey Milk applied for a small community grant from the Community Foundation of Sarasota. A lot of these smaller businesses, if you think about, bars and restaurants and places like that, don't often have a budget for diversity and inclusion work. And so we wanted to be able to provide that, where folks are engaging with the community face to face. And that's really where it started. But as she has supported and gone out and been as visible as she always is, and we've been talking to community members about the hashtag we support, more larger organizations are saying, hey, can we do this? And while the small grant will only take us so far, it's a pilot program, but there are some other folks reevaluating their diversity and inclusion work that do have small budgets to bring in a consultant. And so we have the ability to scale that up, which is exciting as well. So it's been a very organic and quick growth to get a lot of local folks excited about doing the training. The timing's a little bit rough at the start of 2020, as you and I have talked about, with a lot of large gatherings, and even the smaller trainings we were hoping to do have obviously been postponed at this point due to the coronavirus pandemic. But the needs of the community, when we look at employers supporting employees and any public-facing organizations who work with the public to recognize how to best support and empower the LGBTQ plus community. The training is rather simple. It's really about empowering folks who are allies to the LGBT community to feel empowered to be allies. Often with a lack of information, folks are just scared. I don't understand what it's like to be gay because I'm not gay. And we have to sort of fill in their knowledge. And frankly, Steve, even members of the LGBTQ plus community don't always understand other members of our own community because we're all different. I mean, we're a beautiful rainbow of a community, right? So,
right.
A lesbian might not understand what it's like to be, a transgender woman. And we even have to educate within the community. So it's a great way to build partnerships. And, we're talking about very complex things like microaggressions and implicit bias, but it's really about recognizing that we're all people here trying to live out our version of the American dream. And when we are with family and we're traveling to a great community like Sarasota, or when we move into a new community, we want to know that we are able to be safe and have fun and go out to the restaurants and go out to the movies. Of course, a lot of that right now is on hold, but we have to feel a sense of community where we are. And so, I'm very excited about it. And we also have the ability to be flexible and adaptable in providing the training, where that organization is, right? So if we're working with a large museum who has a leadership team, say of 15 or 20 folks and 500 or 600 staff and employees, leadership might want to review case scenarios about how to work with an employee who is maybe disagrees with supporting the LGBTQ community, right? And maybe has a political or a religious objection to that. And this, in no way is looking at infringing on individual liberties, but saying at the workplace, when we are working with the public, how do we conduct ourselves? I mean, I'm not naive to think that we're going to change all hearts and minds, but sometimes hearts and minds change when we just remind each other how to treat one another with respect. And when we get to know someone, we talk about in the training how we saw such an amazing shift when more folks realized how many lesbian, gay, or bisexual friends or family members or neighbors or coworkers they had. And then they started to get to know us, and they realized we're all having the same struggles, paying bills and taking care of kids or taking care of our loved ones, our parents as they're aging, or planning a family trip, or figuring out, how to take care of the crazy dog that tears up the pillows. The transgender community and our gender nonconforming and non-binary communities are, for example, in the much earlier stages of folks personally knowing somebody who is transgender. So we talk a little bit about those needs. And some organizations, are even wanting to really just focus on the trans community, which we could certainly, provide just a working with the trans community 101 as well. So a lot of variety of options. And some organizations, frankly, will say, well, we did an LGBTQ diversity training 5 years ago, or we did one even 3 years ago. I think we've got the covered, or we have a module on our website. We have all of our new employees look at that as a part of, say, new employee orientation. But there are far fewer organizations really diving in a little deeper and doing that live and in person. And when you talk about the changing needs and you get that conversation going, they recognize the importance of that, because what will often happen is supervisors or managers or directors will say, you know what, I actually had an employee bring a situation to me. Or sometimes they don't know if they need any additional training, and you have a staff meeting, and then staff will suddenly share experiences they've had with customers and how they handled it, and say, I wish I had a little bit more information. I don't know if I handled that situation correctly. What if a customer says, a hateful or bigoted word, or says, we still unfortunately are confronted with discrimination, and somebody might say, I don't want to sit next to this customer because, of insert whatever, bigoted, hateful, comment you can imagine. How does that hospitality worker handle that? Some folks might have the skills and be ready to do that. Other folks might not. And you just, as an employer, you don't want to be caught with your staff feeling unprepared. And folks are seeing such a visible community. You just think about how out and proud the LGBT community has become in really decade after decade, certainly since the 80s, but even more so in the last 10 years. And we expect, to be treated well, or at least treated as a customer when we go into businesses or organizations. And it's surprising sometimes when things still come up and we are reminded that the fight for equality isn't over yet. But
exactly. And I was sitting here thinking when you were talking, there is so many incidences out there in public where you see things going on. They have had, I don't know if you've ever seen, there's a pro TV program that goes kind of undercover, and they create scenes in restaurants and things like this, and to see how people will react. Okay.
Yes.
And I've watched some fascinating situations where we are making progress in that actual customers help defend some of the LGBTQ people who are facing discrimination or things like this.
Yes.
And that I think would be an excellent part of the training tool that could be used to educate people and to see why it's needed and let them understand that it's not a joke. It's something that's really going on. And that the LGBTQ community faces this still almost every day someplace, And
it's John Quinones's show. I wish I could use the clips. I'd have to ask permission, and they'd probably charge a lot. But we do use case scenarios that are very similar. And actually, what you draw is a really great example of what this training is about doing. It's compelling, allyship. We talk about being allies, and I love the word. It's sort of overused, and even in diversity and inclusion work, the D&I word is sort of, it means a lot of different things, right? We have to do the work we're doing in understanding how to work with communities who are facing hatred and bigotry and homophobia and transphobia in 2020. We have to do that work intentionally, and we have to do it intersectionally. We have to recognize across generations, across race. If folks are coming in from different experience, whether Black or Latinx or immigrant, or even folks who are retired, who are maybe coming in